I think it's so important for anybody, a woman or a man who's going to therapy or a child to connect with their person and to make sure they have that connection, to not over-tolerate, if you will, a crappy connection.
Right.
And I would say if they don't have a good connection right off the bat, I would try a different therapist.
What up, fam? It's Big Ray Roberts, and this is Big Ray's Garage Grind Mental Health Edition, brought to you by the Mindful Therapy Group. And we've been off the mic for just a few weeks, but we're back on it, and I'm super excited about our guests because we've talked about it, we've hinted at it a couple of different times, and finally we get to talk to my guy, one of the founders with his wife Jessica of the Mindful Therapy Group, Mr. Derek Crain. How you doing, Derek?
Really good.
Good to see you, brother. So I've talked a lot about you guys, like on this show. We've celebrated your winning the Entrepreneur of the Year stuff. We've talked about how our friendship has developed, and I'll say, I remember the first time I met you and Jessica, and pretty much you're right across the hall. And I didn't really know what to think, and I thought, man, these folks think I'm just full of it. Like I don't think they really think I'm in this thing to be into this stuff. But since then, man, just the way that you have shown up for me, the conversations we've had, we've had a chance to share some beers, which we need to get that back on the schedule to do that. And just the way you've supported me and encouraged me, and then, getting to meet Jessica and hang out with you guys just away from this type of stuff. And it's just, it has been wonders for me. I was stuck in the house for a long, long time. And so, to come out, meet some new people, and be able to meet people that are really good people, good-hearted people, and are in it for the right reasons, it's just been like a blessing for me. So I just want to just be able to say on camera, thank you for being that person for me, because I didn't know where this thing was going or how it was going to go. And me and NASA had conversations about it and all these other kinds of things. And then you guys stepped in. I didn't know what was going to happen. It's just been great. So it's great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here, Ray, and I want to thank you, too. I remember telling Jessica, when I went out to have a few beers with you, I met the coolest guy. He was just down to earth, and you and I connected, and I could be myself around you, and it's been great. And I remember, flying back to New York when I was learning about your show. I listened to 6 of your episodes, and I could just relate to your story. Could really connect with it. So I was super excited about meeting you and getting to know you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's interesting too, because, as we started talking, I'm we have very similar stories. And so I want our audience to kind of get to know who Derek Crain is, and then also just kind of walking us through your career with therapy, and then also starting the Mindful Therapy Group, so that's kind of the progression that I want to go in. So we'll just jump right in. We've had conversations, and I've heard you talk about, how it was for you growing up with a single mom in L.A., trying to make ends meet, and then sometimes doing what you had to do to make those ends meet. So what was life like for little Derek Crain growing up?
It was very difficult. I grew up with a single mom, as you said. She was 17 years old when she had me, and I had a little sister who was 4 years younger than me. We lived on welfare for the most part of my childhood, welfare and food stamps. And, I didn't realize it till later on in life, but really I grew up in a life of trauma. And it wasn't because my mom was mean or, she had the intention of bringing me trauma. It was because she was young and she was immature and she was naive. She jumped around a lot from relationship to relationship. We lived in the city of Watts in Los Angeles. We moved around to East LA, and really it was sort of dependent upon, what boyfriend she was going out with at the time. And oftentimes those relationships would end badly, and she would turn to me, her young 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 11-year-old son to sort of, provide support for her, to emotionally console her. And at the time I felt really valued, and I felt like I could, help her. And it kind of charged me. It made me feel like I was, doing something for her. And it created that sort of drive for me to always want to save her, to want to rescue her. And so we moved around from, place to place. We were also very poor. So I remember, moving from the town of Simi Valley where my grandma lived at the time. Simi Valley is a town where they had the Rodney King trial. And all of a sudden, she got influenced by some neighbors who were Mormon, and we were moving to Utah. And we moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, of all places. And I just remember, my sister, she was dark complected. She had a Mexican father, so she was dark complected. And living in Utah, how prejudiced and how racist people were towards my sister. I remember one day coming home from school and my sister telling me that one of the kids in her class was calling her the N-word. And I couldn't take it, and the next day I showed up to her school to pick her up, and I said, point that kid out. Which kid is calling you the N-word? And I went over there and I just socked him in his face and gave him a big fat lip. So was that, the type of upbringing, she'd get married or she'd have another boyfriend. All of a sudden we were packing the car up and we were moving back to California, and we pack up her 1981 Celica with all her belongings, and, we moved back to California. So it kind of created this sort of drive in me to, want to rescue her, but also, rescue women too.
Yeah. So I know that you mentioned the word trauma, and sometimes, since I've started this podcast, I'm out in the public, and people will say, "Man, I love what you're doing, but I've never experienced any trauma." And I think people misunderstand trauma as something that has to be physical, that's happening to you, like, oh, I got beat or attacked or something like that. But when you're speaking of the trauma that you're talking about, you grew up in the midst of trauma. What are some examples of trauma or adverse situations that I would kind of refer to it so that people can access a little bit? Like, what types of trauma would you say, or how would you describe the trauma so that other people can go, like, maybe make a connection in their own life? Like, oh, yeah, like I kind of know what that feels like.
I think that's a great question, Ray, because most people, when they visualize trauma, they think about sexual abuse or physical abuse in a really acute incident, like it's happening right now, and you really feel those effects. The kind of trauma I'm talking about is a sort of chronic trauma where it's happening throughout your life. And the fact that, this young Derek was sort of over-tolerating, all that behavior and all that information that his mom was putting on him, it forced me to, cope with my life in a maladaptive way. So there's sort of all kinds of different traumas, and people just don't have an understanding of the magnitude of different traumas that are out there.
And would you say, too, that is, like, even just the kind of misunderstanding of the word trauma kind of translates to, like, just a misunderstanding of mental health, period?
Oh, you bet. What a great analogy. You bet. And mental health and even the word trauma has such a negative stigma, like something's wrong with you. And nobody wants that label.
Right.
Nobody wants that judgment. So why I love your show is you've been so vulnerable about making trauma or mental health problems, normal.
Right.
Bring some normalness to it.
Yeah, well, it's the thing that was important to me was that I was like you. Like, I grew up, I was the youngest of 4 kids. We lived in like maybe 600 square foot home with my mom and dad and my grandfather. So I shared a room with my grandfather. My 3 sisters slept in one room, and my mom and dad, we had one of the old pull-out couches that became a bed. That's where they slept, like, every night. And so, both my parents were alcoholics. A couple of my sisters were into drugs and stuff like that, like either using or selling or been involved with it somehow. And so, like, I was never spanked by my parents or anything like that, but I was traumatized just by the things that you see. And like you were saying, like the way that you have to live and the way you have to survive and the way you're trying to, I can remember being 6, 7 years old, and my mom would take a couple drinks. I would pour all her alcohol out, use food coloring to recreate the color of the alcohol and pour it back into the bottle so that my mom was just drinking water. She's already 3 sheets to the wind, so it didn't really matter like what else she was drinking. And so that was my way of trying to like be there and help my mom out or some other But like I'm 6 or 7 years old. Why should I be the one doing that? But that is trauma in and of itself. So I wasn't physically abused or anything like that, but it was something that I had to deal with. Can you point to like any like significant event like as at any point in your youth, like growing up, that said, or you came to a realization that like maybe this is not what I should be doing, or that really drove you to this career of being like a therapist in mental health?
You bet. And I think it's much like your situation, because I remember in your earlier episodes, you were talking about finally standing up to your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, if I recall right, he was threatening to abuse your mom or abusing it, and you were physically ready to fight him. I remember my mom, in her 3rd marriage, we were living in a town called Richfield, Utah, small town, about 5,000 people. And she was married to a really rough and tough guy who was a hardcore alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And I remember him just threatening to beat the out of her. Mm. And I remember my sister, scared as hell, crying in the other room. I picked up a baseball bat, and here I am, probably, 85 pounds, 11 years old. And I said, if you lay a finger on him, on her, I will crush you with this bat.
Right.
And, no 11-year-old should have to experience that,
right,
or be in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I think it's important for people to hear that, especially as we tell your story more, because sometimes people see the end result and they just think like, oh man, like, Derek has this thriving business and he's doing all these really cool things, and they don't sometimes most times don't understand the journey that got you there. And so to me, it's important for folks to understand kind of the beginnings of, who you are and how that shaped, where you went, and which is you went into the mental health field to be a therapist first, which I'll be honest with you, when I first met you, I didn't know that. I thought you were just this dude that started this mindful therapy group thing. And then as we've been talking, and you're like, you're advising me on some other stuff, I'm like, oh dang, I didn't know that Derek was actually in the room, like doing these types of things. And but what in your experience, either young Derek, teenage little kid Derek to young adult Derek, what inspired you to go into wanting to be a therapist? Like, you spoke a little bit about like being there for your mom, and she's unloading her issues, and you're trying to figure it out, and stepping up for women and all that stuff. But what was it that in all of that said like, man, this is pushing me to this place, to this career?
I think when you're poor and you live in tough neighborhoods, you're always on the brink of, some kind of attack. And what happened for me is I really learned how to read my environment. Mm. And I really learned how to read people. Mm-hmm. So because of my trauma, I was had good intuition with people and who they were. And that inspired me and drove me, to be in the field of behavioral sciences. So I could really learn and understand people, and it gave me a passion.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that you say that the more we talk, dude, it's like you're from L.A., I'm from North Carolina, like two opposite ends of the country. I'm 6 foot whatever, you're 5 foot whatever. I'm like this big black dude, just a little white guy. But our stories are so similar, because I tell people I could remember being like 6, 7 years old, and my parents had been out for the night, and just the way the door closed, the way my dad would close the car door, I knew that I should find somewhere in our house to hide, because then my mom and dad were going to be at it all night, and I didn't want to be around it. And so then you do develop this instinct where you can just read people, you can read the situation, you kind of go like, something not feeling right, so let me just kind of step out of this thing, or you try to put yourself in a position to have those things not happen. And it's interesting how then that becomes kind of like your makeup it kind of becomes like the person that you are. Like people always ask me, like, well, why are you so approachable? How do you you have a good read on people? And at first, I'm like, I don't know. Like it's just like God given, I guess. You know what I'm saying? But it is through our experiences and things like that. And it sounds like you had the same thing. And so now you're growing up as this young Derek. You're moving all over the country, like to L.A., Utah, all the different places you're saying. How was it for you? How did you get from that place to getting the education that you needed to be a therapist? Because I know we talked before, and you said that I think you got your GED. So at some point you were without high school, degree. I don't know how long, but I know that we talked about that. Talk to us a little bit about that journey.
You bet. I just want to say I was getting chills as you were saying, opening the door as a 6-year-old or listening to that door. It gave me chills because I could totally relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I thought I was going to take my journey to the LAPD. And I went and I got a 99% score on the oral test. I passed the physical test with colors. But it was my mom and her boyfriend at the end of the day who, I wasn't able to get in the LAPD because when the LAPD goes out and they try to background check you, they go and interview all the neighbors. And when they're interviewing the neighbors, one of the neighbors said that I stole their cable. And that's something that I just wouldn't do. It's not who I am, but it was actually my mom's boyfriend. So, ironically, I wasn't able to get on the LAPD, which I wanted to get on badly. And that's what drove me to the field of social work.
I got you. And then in this field of social work, how long had you worked in it just as an individual, like just doing therapy? What was that journey like? Like, how was it getting started? Was it a little nerve-wracking at first? Was it just kind of like putting on your shoes and just felt kind of the same? Or like, what was that journey like?
Well, I think, that journey started early on in the early 90s. And that journey was really working with, kids that at that time were, juveniles with, different issues. And it was hard for me because I was this little, white boy going in to work with these kids, and I was idealistic. And I had really good teachers in there, other trainers in there that said, hey, you got to learn how to set boundaries with these kids. You got to learn how to ask for what you want. And I really learned how to develop my voice, working with kids that had challenges early on at these places. And then I moved up to, Washington with a relationship that didn't work out. Thankfully so, because I eventually met, my awesome wife. And I went to the University of Washington and got my MSW, but I continued to work, at different psychiatric hospitals and different hospitals. And I gained a lot of experience with psychiatric skills and with diagnosis.
So if I'm a first-time person coming to therapy, what are some things that you can tell them or that you would share with them to kind of help ease the unknown a little bit? Because some people have misconceptions of what it is and what's going to happen and what the end results are going to be. But if you're talking to a first-time person in therapy, like what are some of the things that you would share with them to kind of bring them along slowly?
I think the biggest fear that people have when they're going to therapy for the first time is that they're going to be judged. And if somehow, you as a therapist can make them feel like they're normal, their problems are normal, you make them feel supported, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
If you go and you see a therapist and you're feeling judged and you're not feeling like you're in a normal space, that's not the right therapist for you.
How as a therapist do you frame the conversation so that someone doesn't internalize it as judgment or they're in trouble?
I think you have to have good listening skills, and you have to develop a relationship before you can do anything. You don't go to your medical doctor and they're telling you everything that's wrong with you. A doctor that you feel good about is a doctor that really connects with you, that really gets to know you, and then you can start working on different challenges that you have.
Yeah, I will say, and this is my ex-wife Beth could attest to this, that it was a miracle that I ended up going to therapy at the ETI program that the NFL offers, because I've had some really weird experiences in therapy. So at one point, she and I were in marriage therapy, and she went to it was a couple that was our therapist. So she met with the wife on Monday. I met with the husband on Tuesdays, and then we'd meet together on Fridays. And the husband, one time, I'm sitting on the couch, and he stood up, and like, you just thought that he was about to be like Tony Atlas or somebody, like in the WWE. Like, I'm like, what is this guy about to do? And he was like, Ray, like, your anger is going to be the thing that kind of kills your relationship or whatever. And I'm like the least angry dude I know. Like, what are you talking about? And so then he got up and like challenged me. And like I could see it in his face. I'm thinking to myself, like, man, this dude wants to fight me.
And this is a therapist?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, man, I would like clean this whole building up with, like, I was still in the weight room at that time. You know what I'm saying? I had just retired. So I still had all that football offensive lineman energy thing going. Like, well, if someone challenged me, the only thing I know how to do is like, punch and kick, And so I was just like, all right, like, so I just walked away from it. And then I was in therapy again in Virginia. And this guy, this is the first time I had heard about all the mindfulness stuff, and it just wasn't resonating with me, but I was trying it. And then all of a sudden, this dude ghosted me. Like, I'm like, we were supposed to have a meeting, and I'm at his office, and he doesn't show up. And then I could never get into contact with him again. Then fast forward to like a few years before I ended up going to Michigan. Like, I was in therapy with a person, and we're on the call. And then all of a sudden, halfway through the call, they had to take a call, and then just came back and was like, I don't think I can help you. I'm like, what? Whoa, like, we're like in the middle of the session. Like, how can you say that you can't, like, at least let's get to the end and then say, hey, like, we need to reevaluate, like, maybe you need someone better or whatever. But it threw me for such a loop that then that's why I was in the dump for a long, long time, because I just could not, I just figured, like, nobody can fix me. And so thankfully, they got me to this, the After the Impact program that the NFL, my ex-wife ended up calling Sandy Gregory, who worked with the Seahawks, who knew about the program, who got me there. And even in that, it's weird, like the little things, and maybe you know this as a therapist, but the little things that make you feel connected to the therapist is that there was this lady in Michigan, and it was and after like 4 days, I had my one-on-one meeting with her, and I was just like, oh, this is not working. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I have this book. I have all these coping skills I'm trying, and none of it is working. Like, I'm taking cold showers. I'm sticking my face in the cold water. I'm going for walks and all this stuff, and I'm still anxious and nervous and depressed as all get out. And she just looked at me and goes, dude, you only been here for 4 days. And if you know me, you know that dude is my word, right? Like I said, I don't even realize how much I use it until people go like, man, you say dude all the time. And so it was something about her going, dude, you've been here for 4 days. It was just like, boom, this is my person right here. Like, this is the person that's going to help me. And it was that little comment made me feel super connected to her. So that
she shot you real.
Yeah, for real. And then she actually, gave me a little bit of background information about her battles and things. Because my view of going to therapy used to be like I'm going to the principal's office. Because the rooms are kind of like, not the most inviting rooms all the time, or at least they didn't used to be. And I always felt like the person sitting across from me had their life in order. And they're looking at me going like, dude, like, dang, like, how could your life get so out of order, And so even though if they weren't judging me, I had already decided that they're judging me, And so just by her being super, and this is a crazy thing. It was the first time I had ever met with a therapist outside a building. We were sitting outside in the yard. And I was like, well, this is weird. Like, I've never been in therapy outside, And so it's just those two little things like really connected me to her, and she really helped me through the whole process. I don't know if I would have stayed the whole 32 days if I hadn't connected with her there. So that connection is important. What would you say to folks that are looking for therapy and go to the one person and it doesn't feel like it's working, and then maybe are like me that goes like, this is not, the therapy thing isn't for me? What would your advice be?
Well, first of all, just say your story is amazing, and I think it's not uncommon for most men or many men to feel like they're going to be judged, when they go to therapy. I think it's so important for anybody, a woman or a man who's going to therapy or a child, to connect with their person. and to make sure they have that connection, to not over tolerate, if you will, a crappy connection.
Right.
And I would say if they don't have a good connection right off the bat, I would try a different therapist. Even though, we're a company that has over or almost 1,600 providers, I always tell people, don't just see somebody for the heck of it. See somebody you connect with. See somebody who you want to see. See somebody who you feel good with, who you feel supported by. Because if you don't feel supported by them, there's always going to be that lack of trust, and it's going to end up sabotaging that relationship somehow.
Yeah.
So that therapeutic bond that you had with your therapist in Detroit or in Michigan, so valuable.
Yeah, I call her the boss because she was like this little lady, and it's just like I can remember one time I stayed in bed like half the day and got up, went and did my therapy, went for my walk, did my workout, all this other kind of stuff, and then I had my one-on-one meeting with her, and I was just feeling down, and she was like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Man, I can't believe I stayed in the bed half the day. Like my one thing here is that I wanted to make sure I got up and got outside and all this stuff." And so she goes, "But Ray, like you won the day." I'm like, "No, I didn't. I stayed in bed half the day." And so she's like, "Okay, let's go through your whole day." And then she's like, "Look at all these things you've done. You still made all." So she was like, "You have to count all the small victories." And I was just like, man, like no one's ever told me that, because I was just thinking that one half day was the defeat.
Yeah.
But I had actually defeated the day because I still got completed what I needed to do. And sometimes, man, that sounds like so simple to understand that you should be able to go like, oh yeah, but I still got up and did. But man, your mind can play so many tricks on you. And then so it's important to have someone be able to speak that.
But let me ask you this. Once you started feeling connected to her, could she challenge you? Could she push on you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There were so many things where she would ask me to try, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, there's no way I'm doing that. And she'd be like, Ray, you're going to do it, and tomorrow you're going to tell. Like, she had me, she kind of knew the types of things that would kind of get me twisted up. And so she knew when I'd be in that place, and she goes, I want you to sit in that for a little bit. I'm like, nah, I don't want to sit in it. Like, I was like a little 2-year-old, with a little temper tantrum. And she's like, nope, you're going to sit in it, and then we're going to work our way through it. Like, just the two of us are going to be here. You're going to practice the things that we've been talking about, like all those types of little things. It's just like, it was just, and then I'd be like, okay, like, let me do what she said, and give it a shot. And so, yeah, she's really, and like, it was so, the connectedness was so good. I was like, why don't you and your husband like move to Seattle and let's just start our practice out in Seattle, because I needed you to be in Seattle, so if I needed a therapist, I could come to her. And but she was really good at that, and like she could challenge me in a way that it wasn't like confrontational or anything.
Yeah.
But she would say it in a way that like my rational brain would go, you know what, like she is right. You should probably give it a try. Or
and
you should
I caught a glimpse of her.
Yeah.
I caught a glimpse of her saying, we're going to sit in it together. A good therapist will sit in and walk with that pain with you.
Yeah.
If you're feeling rejection, or you're feeling loneliness, or you're feeling unworthy, a good therapist will really sit in that pain with you.
Yeah, she did. And she was... And the cool thing, too, she knew nothing about football. Like, she would just try to make these football analogies, and I'd just be like, you know what? I don't know what you did in your past, but let's stick to those analogies. Don't do the football one, because they're not making sense. They're not helping me at all. But no, it was honest to God, if it wasn't for that lady, I would have left there in the first week, because I'd have just chalked it up to like, yep, see, this thing doesn't work for me. But she was not going to let me leave. And she wasn't going to leave me alone in the mess that I was in, And so I really appreciated that. So I probably send her a text once a month, every month since I left there, just to check in on her, say hello, just what's up, and just keep it moving. It's not like some big, crazy conversation, but it was really incredible. So we're sitting here with Derek Crain, who is one of the founders with his wife Jessica of the Mindful Therapy Group. Based in the Pacific Northwest, is a diverse group of qualified mental health providers offering both in-person and virtual care. Whether it's talk therapy or medication management, you can book your first visit within 1 week. Visit mindfultherapygroup.com to start your journey to better mental health today. So, Derek, the Mindful Therapy Group, I'm not 100% sure how you guys, I don't know if you heard the podcast or how it got presented to you, but you guys, I think after like the second episode, at least that's how we're like already in on the podcast. So before we get into how you guys built the Mindful Therapy Group, how did it come to be that we're sitting across from each other having this relationship right now?
Oh my gosh. I think, I have to give credit to my wife. I'm good at reading people. Mm-hmm. I'm good at analyzing, and I'm a hell of a salesman. From the time I was little, when I lived in Las Vegas, I was sharing this story the other day, and I sold candy bars, little 25-cent candy bars that I buy from the store that I'd sell to make extra money for myself. But my wife, she's the one that in 2011, or 2010. She encouraged me, Jessica Crain, she's the Chief Operating Officer at Mindful Therapy Group. She encouraged me to, stop about being in the hospital system, stop complaining about managed care, and go get your own business. But at that time, I was afraid. Yeah. I was afraid of getting a business license. I was afraid of getting everything you need to do to get a business. And she has that kind of a brain where she's not afraid to do anything operationally. You met her before. Yeah. You see how brave she is. And when I felt I had her support, we created the group. And initially I thought, oh my gosh, we need to bring on all these different types of providers. I want to bring on a marriage and counseling therapist. I want to bring on an eating disorder therapist. I want to bring on, a family therapist. And we did. But what we realized is that, we really didn't connect with any of those providers at the time. So we learned a lot in business over the last, 13 years that we've been in business. And one of the things that we learned is to consult with people. So we had a guy that we worked with that helped us create the business model. He was a guy that we found on Craigslist. His name is Steve, and he helped us put together the business model. But we'd always go to them when we were struggling and say, hey, Steve, we're struggling. And a lot of times he'd say to us, hey, guys, you guys are being stop being and just get your together and connect with people. Or bring on the people that you really connect with. Right. And once we started bringing on the people that we connected with, boy, we started to elevate. We started to take off. And then, from there, we learned so many other business lessons.
Right. So what need in the market did you see as a individual therapist that made you go like, there is a need for this larger group provider? You're going to help support other therapists. Like, what was the gap that you saw that made you think that this type of the Mindful Therapy Group was a need?
Well, initially when I started doing therapy, I didn't realize how big the need was until, when I started getting on all the insurance panels, on all the insurance payers that sort of, different insurances like Primera or Blue Cross that help patients get, access to care. I didn't realize, how big the need was, but I filled up my schedule and the clients kept coming. Yeah. And I kept having to turn them away. Right. And I felt so bad. And so I went to Jessica, I said, we got a problem to solve here. How do we create a business that can, we can bring on providers and we can meet this need? Because I can't see all these patients. And at that time I was working like a dog, seeing 40 patients a week, thinking that doing therapy was like working a full-time job, but it's not, And we had a newborn son at the time, and I was seeing patients, 8 hours in a row, and I remember where it got really bad because I was so tired that I actually fell asleep on one of my clients. Oh no! It was mortifying, and I just had to eat crow when I woke up, and I said, I'm exhausted because I was up with my baby all night, and my wife was a nurse at UW, working overnights. Right.
So let me ask you this then, 2 questions. One is, how do you, use that example, how do you hold on to like your own mental health and wellness as a therapist? And then 2, I think that you and Jessica are a freaking study in how a married couple can run a business, because it has to not be easy all the time. Like to be in the business together, at home together, taking the work home, and trying to figure out those boundaries around it. So I know those are two kind of loaded different questions, but one is like, how do you hold on to your own sanity as you were a therapist? And then two is just the team that you and Jessica are is amazing, and it's awesome. And I think people should have a little bit of understanding of how that works.
I was thinking about this earlier today. I think the answer to your first question is really taking that time to get breaks. And I learned to condense my hours earlier on. At first, I was seeing 8 clients a day. It's just too much. So you have to figure out how many clients can I emotionally see in a day? Because you got to understand, you're taking on these clients' emotional stories vicariously, and you're absorbing that. And that has to go somewhere. So I think you need healthy support systems in place. You need, good friends. You need physical outlets. And sometimes you need your own therapy.
Right.
The question about my wife, and I was thinking about, Jessica, is how we work together as a team. I think it's really knowing your strengths. And I really know what I'm good at. I'm a good therapist, and I'm a good reader of people. And her brain is so operationally minded. Even together, if we were like, when we go out and we have an Airstream, and sometimes we go camping. I'm the one that drives it because I have great, sort of energy levels to drive, and she's the one that backs it in, because she's got the fine motor skills, and she's got the attention to detail to back it in. So people will look at us and go, well, why isn't this dude backing in the trailer? Is he some kind of a wimp? And it's just, no, it's just honoring each other's strengths, and letting go of the pride, that, you have to be manly to back in that trailer. So I think in business it's the same way. Is you have to let go of the things that you're not good at. She's good at a lot of things, and I'm good at a lot of things, and we both are very attuned to it. Now, sometimes business spills over to the private life. And then you have to, she'll look at me and say, hey, I don't want to talk about business right now. And you have to respect that. Even though you want to kind of compulsively get something off your chest, you got to respect it. And then we've learned to carve out times, like when we're in work mode, anything's a go.
I got you.
But when we're at family mode, we're home with our 3 kids. We have a great 14-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 5-year-old. We're with them, and we want to be present with them.
Well, I think it's amazing. Like, I didn't know what to expect, like I said earlier, when we first met. And I'll be honest, like, I remember, like, we were sitting in the room across the hall, and I was like, man, Jessica is, like, reading me like crazy. Like, I was just like, oh, man, like, it was a little bit intimidating. I'm like, I better make sure I know what I'm talking about, what I'm saying. And then when I got to meet her and, we got to know each other and stuff, it's been one of the coolest friendships and experiences I've had in a long time. Is just meeting the two of you guys and getting to hang out with you guys and get to experience different things with you guys and have you guys support me and be genuinely friends of mine and be genuinely interested in what's going on. And even, the two of us have been able to get to a place where we kind of support each other. And we we can text back and forth and not have to say, put in a whole lot of detail, but kind of know what's happening and been able to support each other. And I just think it's amazing. Like there is so much respect that I just have for your story. And, obviously I don't know Jessica's individual story, but I know your individual story because we've talked about it. And then I've heard you talk about it even more. And it's hearing a little bit more about it today and just how similar, our upbringing is. And then, how we read people. I mean, the whole thing is just pretty incredible. But then to see how to watch you and Jessica work, it's just freaking awesome. I just love watching it. You guys are 2 great people, and you guys have done some great, amazing things, and you keep doing the stuff, the services that you're providing for people, the physical places you've opened up. I think you can, was it here? You have a place in Seattle, Denver.
We're in Washington, Oregon. We're in Arizona. we're in Nevada, and we're in Colorado.
There you go. Absolutely. Yeah. So I know that you guys are doing amazing work for people that need it. And I would love, I know that we're running out of time, and so I want to have a part 2 of this at some point, because I just want to get a little bit deeper into like your story and into the story of the Mindful Therapy Group, because I think it's just truly, truly amazing. But I want to take this time, this whole thing like, hey, you don't give people their flowers and all this stuff. I just want to give you the flowers because, dude, you like, this has been, this podcast and this work and these conversations are the most important things in my life right now. And so to be able to have someone like you who's been in the work, who's been a therapist, who have this organization going that's helping so many people, to be able to have my back in it, I just can't thank you enough. You and actually NASA too. I mean, NASA. I went to NASA, who's producing the show. He said, "I'm pointing like this. I know y'all can't see him, but he's sitting right there." I remember after we recorded the first 2 things, and I went to NASA, I was freaking out. Like, man, I don't know what equipment to get. I don't know, like, where am I going to record it, or what kind of mics, what type of mixers, like all this other kind of stuff. And NASA was like, hey, man, don't worry about that stuff. Like, you just worry about bringing the content, and then we're going to get this other stuff, set it up for you. And it was such a relief because it was something I really, really, truly wanted to do. So 2 of the people that have, like, a big influence on me sitting in this chair and continue to be able to have this conversation sitting right in front of me. And I just really, really do appreciate you guys for showing up for me that way.
Well, likewise, man. And I want to say, last week I was really hurting myself and was really anxious. And I reached out to you, and you were there for me, man, in every step of the way. And it helped me get through the day that I had to get through. And, to be able to have that vulnerability and share that with another man is super cool, and I just appreciate that, and I hope we can inspire other men and other people to be vulnerable with each other, and be able to reach out when they're hurting, because that's what a lot of people are afraid to do, and They need that support.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, I really do appreciate you have been on the show, Derek Crain, the co-founder with Jessica Crain of the Mindful Therapy Group, who is the title sponsor of Big Ray's Garage Grind. So that'll do it for us for this episode. And like we always end the show with, the first thing is it's okay to not be okay. Number 2 is if you're experiencing a mental health crisis, reach out to your medical provider for some guidance and assistance there. And number 3, if you need help and you ask for help, you're operating from a position of power. And so that's it. Until the next time, I'm Big Ray, and this has been Big Ray's Garage Grind Mental Health Edition. Peace, and I'm out.